All right, this next video goes over questions 7, 8, 10, 11, and 13, which is the skill for comparing and ordering rational numbers. So let's start with number 7. It says order the values from least to greatest. So first things first, we got to actually look at what numbers we're starting with or that we need to put in order. The first two numbers are good because they're in decimal form, but that third number is a fraction that we need to convert into a decimal. So 3 3/5. Two different ways you can do it. You can either cartwheel and change it into an improper. So 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18. So this would be 18 over 5. And that's what we can divide. So remember, top dog in the house, 18 divided by 5. 5 can't go into 1, put a 0. 5 goes into 18 3 whole times, and we're left with a 3. Add your decimal, add your 0, drop your 0, and then 5 goes into 30 6 times. Shoot your decimal through the roof, and we are good. So 3 3/5 is 3.6 as a decimal. And then don't forget there were the absolute value signs up there, but the absolute value of 3.6 would just be 3.6. So now that all three numbers are as decimals, we can put them in order. Off the bat, there are 2 negatives and there's 1 positive. So we know our positive number is going to be our greatest. So we can put the absolute value of 3 3/5 all the way on the right because we know that's our greatest number. Now these other 2 numbers, we have 3.61 negative and negative 3.66. So normally we would go, okay, they both have a 3, gotta look at the next one. They both have a 6, we gotta look at the next one. And then we have a 1 and a 6, and normally we would say 6 is greater than 1. But this negative tells us we have to think backwards. So our number with the smallest value would be negative 3.66. And then negative 3.61 would be in the middle. Next one, it says order the values from greatest to least. So it's reverse of the one we just did. First number is the absolute value of negative 0.1. Remember, absolute value is just the distance from 0. So negative 0.1 is just 0.1 units away from 0. 1/9 we have to change into a decimal. So top dog in the house, 1 divided by 9. 9 can't go into 1. Add our decimal, add our 0. 9 goes into 10 1 time. We're left with a 1. Add a 0, drop a 0. 9 goes into 10 1 time. And we see our pattern. So 0.11 with our little line above it, that means it's going to keep repeating. So 0.11 repeating. And then our last one is negative 2/5. So we got to change it into a decimal. 2 divided by 5. 5 can't go into 2. Add our decimal, add our 0. 5 goes into 20 4 whole times. And we're done. Now, for this last one, can't forget to bring your negative with you. So negative 0.4. Looking at our 3 numbers, now we can compare them and put them in order. Our negative number, there's only 1, so we know that's going to be our smallest or our least. So negative 2/5 is our least. And then we have 2 other numbers. So we have 0.11 repeating and 0.1. Now, looking at just 0.1, we should recognize that the next number would be a 0. and that'll help us when we compare these two. So our first two numbers are 0 and 0, gotta keep going. 1 and 1, gotta keep going. We have a 1 and we have a 0. 1 is greater than 0, and they're not negative, so we can keep that thinking. So that means 1/9 is greater than the absolute value of negative 0.1. And that is our order from greatest to least. All right, number 10 says list these numbers in order from the least absolute value to the greatest absolute value. So first things first, we've got to find the absolute value of all of these numbers. Absolute value of -9 would be 9. Absolute value of 3, 3. Absolute value of 6 is 6. Absolute value of -20 would be 20. Absolute value of 15 is 15, and the absolute value of -5 is 5. So our smallest number here would be 3, and it was originally a 3, so we can just put it there. Next would be our 5, but it originally was -5, so we've got to put that next. And then 6, and then 9, which was originally -9. 15, and then -20. And remember, you have to write it as it was originally given to you. All right, number 11 is a two-part question. It says, some AMMS teachers have joined Weight Watchers. The table to the left shows their weight loss or gain. Write an inequality comparing Oprah's and Miss Smith's results. So we're talking about change here. So we remember that we have to use absolute value when we are writing our inequality. Okay, so Oprah was -5, but we got to put it inside the absolute value. And then Miss Smith was -5.5 inside our absolute value. And when we compare these two numbers, the absolute value of -5 is 5, and the absolute value of -5.5 is 5.5. So our inequality should be open to 5.5. And then part B was comparing Miss McCall's and Miss Sherrick's results. So Miss McCall was -3, but still weight change, so it goes inside our absolute value. And then Miss Sherrick was +2 inside our absolute value. And the absolute value of -3 is +3, and the absolute value of +2 is +2. Our inequality should be open to +3. And last problem, it says circle all the true inequalities. So they give you 4 different ones. You have to figure out if or which ones are true. So let's just start with this first one. -1.6 is less than -1 2/3. First thing we have to do is change that 2/3 into a decimal. So 1 2/3 when we cartwheel. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So this is 5/3. Top dog in the house, 3 on the outside. 3 goes into 5 one time. Get a 2. Add our decimal, add our 0, drop our 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. We're left with a 2. Add a 0, drop a 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times again. And we see our pattern has started. So this is going to be 1.66 repeating. So we have two numbers, -1.6 and -1.66 repeating. So when we're comparing these two numbers, remember our next number in -1.6 is a 0. That'll help us. Now, we do have to think backwards because both of these numbers are negatives. So we have a 1 and a 1, keep going. We have a 6 and a 6, keep going. and we have a 0 and a 6. Normally we would say 6 is greater than 0, but in this case, they are negatives, so we have to think backwards, which means that negative 1.6 should be greater than negative 1 2/3. So this is not a true inequality. Next, we have negative 4/5 is less than or equal to negative 0.8. So top dog in the house, 4, 5 on the outside. 5 can't go into 4, put a 0, add our decimal, add our 0. 5 goes into 40 8 times perfectly, and we're done. So negative 4/5 as a decimal is negative 0.8. Negative 0.8 is equal to, which is allowed in this inequality. So this would be a true statement. Next one says 2 1/2 is greater than the opposite of negative 2.05. So the opposite of negative 2.05 would be 2.05 positive, and 2 1/2 as a decimal would be 2.5. So this is a true inequality. 2.5 is greater than 2.05. Then last but not least, we have the opposite of the absolute value of negative 9/10 is greater than or equal to 0.9. First things first, we have to make this a decimal. So top dog in the house, 9 divided by 10. 10 can't go into 9. Put our decimal, put our 0. 10 goes into 90 9 times perfectly. Then we have to deal with the opposite of and our absolute value. So first things first, do the absolute value of negative 0.9 is 0.9, and then the opposite of it is negative 0.9. So back up to our inequality, is negative 0.9 greater than or equal to positive 0.9? The answer is no, so that is not a true inequality.